morning, Monday morning, post UFC 300. And was it everything that we had expected out of this event? The reality is, yes, this is exactly what I told you guys was going to happen. It was going to be very lackluster, the build up to it, because the names and the matchups just seemed like it didn't make sense. But as always, the action absolutely delivered. We're also going to talk about Conor McGregor finally coming back in the original date that he had originally mentioned way beforehand, but the UFC wanted to do other things in terms of, let's say, just promotional value or timing of the promotion. And what better time than to announce it just right after UFC 300? And then also, we're going to talk about Ronda Rousey and her claims of being the GOAT and how it's rubbing a lot of people the wrong way. Well, guess what? Of course it's going to rub you the wrong way because you saw her get knocked out in her last two fights, and it made you realize, you know what? What is so great about you? But at the same time, you really got to wonder and think to yourself, you know what? This is what it takes to be a fighter. You got to believe in yourself. You have to think that you are the greatest thing on earth in order for you to even get out there and survive, let alone become one of the greatest of all time to ever do it. So you can't really blame Ronda Rousey for feeling that way. Now, jumping a little bit back and forth, going into 300, a lot of you did not expect this card to be as great as it was. The results came, and all of a sudden, it became way more than what you would expect. Max Holloway getting a knockout, literally in the last round, in the last second, 1 second left, before the bell was going to ring, and he scores a knockout. Who can do that? Who has done that? And the reality is, not very many people. And as a result, UFC 300 went down as probably one of the greatest cards of all time. And you know what's crazy about this? Every card seems to be the greatest of all time. You want to know why? The UFC and its entire sport of MMA is the greatest sport, and UFC is the greatest league to host that sport. And as a result, you're always going to have all these variations that are going to come about with 1 second left, and then you get a knockout. 1 second left, and you get a submission, similar to Demetrius Johnson. He's had a record exactly like that, but it was a submission rather than a knockout. Literally with 1 second left. Nobody has been able to do that. Very few people. Max Holloway lended himself into taking a risk, and not only that, taking a risk while he was already winning. He didn't need to do that. The fact that he was able to do that absolutely showed that he was seeking greatness. And not a lot of people are down to seek greatness. Many people are afraid to even try. Many people are afraid to not coast, okay? Because he could have easily just coasted, and he chose not to. It just seems that Max has the proclivity, along with the entire sport of MMA, to lend itself to these exciting moments of time. So, going back to the Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler fight, I gotta be honest with you. I'm afraid for Conor McGregor's safety in terms of his recovery going into this fight. Not only that, you have to think to yourself, how long has he been training camp in terms of actual training while being healed? Because those are the questions you got to ask. Were a lot of these particular training camps he was doing, was he 50% injured and 50% ready to go, right? And if that's the case, man, it's not a full camp. And especially the fact that the fight is going to be held in June. Now, also, I urge you guys to also take a look at my video before you like and subscribe. Take a look at the video that I made about Islam and Dustin Poirier. I knew that this was going to be signed days before it was going to be announced. And now, in the UFC 300 post-fight press conference, Dana White announces that Islam Makhachev is taking on Dustin Poirier. Also, here's another bonus content that we should talk about right now. How about Sean Strickland and his pay? Because obviously, he did not want to take this fight with Paulo Costa originally. He didn't want to do it because you got to understand, he was the champion, making a lot of money as the champion, and became popular when he was champion. And now to be pushed down as just another contender, another UFC roster signee, it really put him down to a different level, right, in terms of pay. So they went back to his original contract. This is something a lot of you have to understand. You go back to your original contract once you are no longer champion. And when you are champion, you literally get $500,000 to show up and maybe another $500,000 to win the fight. Okay? And that's literally Sean Strickland's career as sort of an early millionaire in his championship run. And now he has to go back to basically being a six-figure worker, which isn't a bad deal, right? Because I guarantee many of you don't even have a six-figure job, right? That's just the reality of it. But here's a guy that was used to, at least one time in his whole entire career, making millions. And as a result, he didn't get any of that. Now he has to fight Paulo Costa, and he was fighting the UFC on those contract negotiations, and only for him to fold and actually take that fight with Paulo Costa, because guess what? Here's one thing we're going to love about Sean Strickland. He's a fighter's fighter, and he's a fan favorite for a reason, and he took on that fight based on the fact that he knew that somewhere down the line he was going to get a title shot at some point, or just decided to bet on himself. We don't know what made Sean Strickland take this fight. Perhaps also the UFC may have folded and decided, you know what? We're going to give you what you want. You deserve it. You are a superstar. You are well known. You have garnered all this attention. So therefore, we're going to help you out. Is that the case? We don't know. But what we do know is that Sean Strickland is now signed, sealed, and delivered for Paulo Costa on the same card, I believe, as Islam Makhachev and Dustin Poirier. So that right there is a perfect card for them to be on. And on top of that, Dustin Poirier, a lot of people are saying that he's not really the most well-deserved fighter to be able to get this title shot. Okay, here's the reality of it, right? That's correct. Dustin Poirier doesn't deserve this, but he deserves this. What do I mean by that? Hit the like button and I'll tell you right now. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe as I give you reasons as to why I believe that Dustin Poirier deserves this fight. So you have to understand, UFC is a business, okay? And the fact that it's a business, this is exactly what you have to do. You have to go out there and find a guy that's going to put butts in seats. This fight is going to be taking place in Prudential Center in New Jersey. Will a lot of people come to see Dustin Poirier in New Jersey? Yes. Will a lot of people come to see Islam Makhachev in New Jersey? Yes. There's a huge Arab population in New Jersey, and a huge Muslim population at that, which will come and support Islam Makhachev. There's also a huge UFC fan base in New Jersey that knows who Dustin Poirier is and won't mind spending their dollar, hard-earned dollar at that, to go see these guys fight. So that is the reason why Dustin Poirier is in this position. And a lot of people are not going to like it. A lot of people are going to be very upset. But a business is a business by the end of the day, and it is all about the bottom dollar and nothing else. So as a result, this is what you got. You got Dustin Poirier taking on Islam Makhachev while everybody else is busy. Now, Arman Tsarukyan barely beat Charles Oliveira. Look at the way that Islam Makhachev beat Charles Oliveira convincingly. How did Arman Tsarukyan beat him? Controversially. Why? Because he slapped on a Darce choke in the first round, and in the third round, it looked like he was also going to do the same thing, only for Arman Tsarukyan to survive. The problem is, a lot of people did not look at that fight and say to themselves, wow, Arman Tsarukyan did good in between the fights and the majority of the fight. So as a result, your eyes only wish to see what they want to see, which was that Charles Oliveira somehow was robbed. Now, is that true? Is that really the case that he was robbed, quote unquote? The reality is no. Because fighting, when it comes to scoring, especially in mixed martial arts, it's really all about the entire fight, okay? And round by round basis. What does this comment say right here? Hairline reveal. Hairline reveal. I don't understand the question to that, but whatever. Uh, Dumb comment. I don't know what you're trying to insinuate with that comment or whatever, but uh, at least I'm not the type of person to go to Turkey, and you know the rest of that. By the way, speaking of which, I want to bring that up. Okay, I gotta tell you this. So, uh, let's see, guys that go to Turkey, okay, especially if you grapple, your hair follicles end up falling out anyway because of the strenuous nature that you have to deal with when it comes to training grappling or MMA. So make of that as you will. And that's the last time I'm going to address that dumb comment. But anyhow, so going back into Charles Oliveira and Arman Tsarukyan, it is quite obvious that people are upset because of the small moments of time that Charles Oliveira had, and he's a fan favorite. But nonetheless, Arman Tsarukyan won, and as a result of Arman Tsarukyan winning, well, guess what, man? He's up for grabs in terms of a title shot coming up next after Dustin Poirier and Islam Makhachev. You see, Islam Makhachev just wants Dustin Poirier in his resume. Maybe even outdo Khabib in the way that Khabib had beaten him. Or maybe perhaps, I'll give you an early prediction right now. This fight is going to go the distance, but it's going to go in the direction of Islam Makhachev. Okay? As always, Dustin Poirier is going to give a great account of himself. And not only is he going to give a great account of himself, he's going to lose convincingly because Islam is just a dominant champion. Also, here's another thing that I think is really important to take notice. The fight is in New Jersey. Neutral ground. Does Islam Makhachev really need more advantages, being that he's already a dominant champion? Okay, so Dustin Poirier, they could have put this fight in New Orleans. I know that the UFC is sort of working on getting a New Orleans deal, right, to have some fights down there. And who better than, obviously, the king of Louisiana, Dustin Poirier, to get down there and do the fight, headline a fight, maybe even win a fight. But they'll save that for a later date because what they need is a neutral ground. Okay, so the neutral ground is going to be New Jersey. It's not Abu Dhabi, where all the advantages are going to be on Islam. It's not going to be in New Orleans, where Dustin Poirier can just get up out of bed and go to the arena and get himself a fight. No, it's not that at all. It's literally a 50-50 situation. New Jersey, Prudential Center, June. Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. A great card. A great card. Artem deserves a title shot. TRT Fed says Artem deserves a title shot. I tell you what, Artem I don't know what's going on with Artem, right? I should do a separate video on Artem. I know he has that situation going on with Conor McGregor. It's quite sad, honestly, in the part of Conor McGregor, because you have to understand, right? All this is just over money. I got to be honest with you. This is not something you're going to see out of Khabib and the Eagle team in terms of arguing about money or things of that nature. It's just not going to happen. It's not what's going on in that team. It's not what you're going to see out of that team. But unfortunately, it's what you see out of Conor McGregor's team because of the ethos that they live by. And what exactly is that? Well, the ethos that they live by is, well, you got to go out there and get your own, right? You know, this hyper capitalist mentality, which, by the way, I don't mind, okay, because I can tell you right now, many of us really benefit from capitalism in terms of lifestyle, in terms of comfortability, and in terms of access to the world that other people may not have, right? The exclusivity of it all. But at the same time, there's also an aspect of honor culture in terms of really just allowing your friends to get a little bit of dough, right? Considering that he helped you out, right? Considering that he helped you out and the fact that he was your sparring partner for quite a long time, okay? For a long time, Conor McGregor and Artem Lobov were longtime sparring partners. You have to understand how much Artem Lobov may have contributed to the career of Conor McGregor. And let me tell you why. Conor McGregor is a hard hitter. Okay, he hits hard. Now, can you imagine what it would be like to get in there and spar with Conor McGregor on a daily basis if you were a 145er or if you were a 155er, and even the 170-pound fighters that he's in there with, he basically knocks your head clean. And guess what? As a result, this makes Conor McGregor really a difficult person to spar with. So now, Artem Lobov is a guy that was willing to oblige Conor McGregor in terms of actually getting in there and sparring with him round after round, year after year. So I understand that Artem was the guy that sort of gave the idea to the liquor brand, right? Why not just pay him a little bit? Instead, now he's out trying to sue you. You ruin a relationship that you've had for a long time, and here we are. But anyways, I got to tell you, when it comes to the fight game, one of the most interesting aspects of the fight game is storylines where you have friend versus friend falling out, right? Jorge Masvidal, Colby Covington was a great example of that. Maybe somewhere down the line, Artem Lobov and Conor McGregor can meet if, let's say, Conor McGregor gets on such a bad losing streak to the point where Artem Lobov is literally the only one that can revamp his career in terms of getting a solid win. But as far as Artem Lobov goes, he has to build up his own wins as well. Obviously, he was coming off of some losses at the BKFC. And as a result of that, well, you know what? Unfortunately, he got kicked out of the UFC after that Khabib incident. We never got to see that El-Kheer fight. Artem gave a good account of himself in a lot of fights that he had been in the UFC, for example, with Cub Swanson. And among other fights that he's really put on in terms of, an overachieving performance in ways that we did not expect out of him. But in any regard, yeah, that's really all I have to say about Artem Lobov and Conor McGregor, as Conor McGregor is now signed to fight Michael Chandler, which has been really a long time coming. But it's better that it's here than never going to be here. Uh, but we got a date. We got a date, and that's International Fight Week And once again, Conor McGregor followed that same trajectory from the Nate Diaz fight. If you remember, in 2016, he lost in March of that year, only to come back in August of that same year, and they were going to do the rematch a whole lot earlier. Literally, they were going to do that rematch in July. And after they were going to do that rematch in July, unfortunately, it didn't fall through because Conor did not want to do all the media obligations that were involved in that fight. So they decided to move UFC 200 to UFC 202 against Nate Diaz. And then in UFC 205, he obviously went in there and headlined the first New York card and as the first double champion of the UFC. So that's what we got going on. Conor McGregor signed. Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier signed. Paulo Costa versus Sean Strickland is signed for that same card with Dustin Poirier. And now let's talk more UFC 300. Now, what about Alex Pereira? I got to be honest with you. Full disclosure, I got that prediction wrong. I got it wrong, man. Because I was really convinced that Jamal Hill was going to beat Alex Pereira. Why? Why did I get this wrong, and why did I believe that he was going to beat him? Well, for the reason being that, let's just be honest, I think that he's a whole lot more well-rounded, or so I thought. Definitely not far-fetched to believe that Hill is a lot more well-rounded. The problem is, none of that showed because, once again, the knockout prowess and the striking prowess of Poatan was too potent. And as a result, he got the knockout and did his little famous this little thing that he does right here, right? So he does that, and I got to tell you, it's quite entertaining. He's sort of showing a different wrinkle to his personality, even though we often think of his personality as rather dull or just really just somebody that really just doesn't do much, right? I mean, that's really the legacy of Poatan, if you really think about it. He's just a guy that really doesn't do much in terms of talking, in terms of really doing anything flamboyant, or in terms of really putting himself out there. He's just a normal fighter that does normal things, and that's that. So, what else? What else is in that card that we could talk about? So, the fight with Weili Zhang and Yonan. I got to be honest with you. That particular fight right there was a whole lot better than what we would have expected. And again, a lot of these fights, quite frankly, many of them are a whole lot better than what we expected. Why? For one, I got to be honest with you. Many of us really did not believe that that card or that particular fight belonged in that extravagant of a card. And reason being is because we just thought that, you know what? This would have been better off to put in a fight card in China. This would have been better off to put maybe in the Apex. But boy, did they deliver. And how did they deliver? I got to tell you that, for one, the choke, right? I've never seen anyone get choked and literally laid out in between the rounds only for the referee and the corner people to try and revive her. I've never seen anything like that. So, just something to think about. But also, Weili Zhang, again, I think really proved that she's a whole lot more well-rounded than what we would believe. Okay, because not only did Weili Zhang go out there and dominate her on the feet, not so much dominate her, but also dominated her on the ground as well, showed new wrinkles to her game. So, yeah, I've gone over UFC 300 in the post fight that I did. I literally did a live reaction to the main event, and then right after did a post fight review. I urge you guys to check that out. It is on the live section of this channel. But the last thing that I want to talk about for the last 5 minutes is Ronda Rousey. Okay, so I saw her on the Diary of a CEO podcast, and I thought it was very revealing. A lot of the things that she had talked about, for example, being in a abusive relationship with her coaches. Many of her coaches thought that it was a good idea to, let's say, sort of go rough on her a little bit, right? Sort of toughen them up. And again, it begs the question towards understanding, is that really effective? Or is that really just an old school way of really thinking that it's effective when it's not? And then the concussions that came into play, I think that this is very common in combat sports. I think that there's a lot of guys that have injuries that they don't disclose to the wider public. But at the same time, I also think that this is one of those situations where it's a whole lot more normal than what it really seems out to be. But the fact that it's Ronda Rousey, I think that it can be put in much more exaggerated terms than what we would like to believe. But for now, that's all that I really have for you for this morning. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Watch till the beginning and end, and I'll see you guys